Welcome to the C.L.I.M.B. This is a show dedicated to helping singers, songwriters, and indie artists like you create leverage in the music business. What is leverage? It's the strategic advantage. It's the power to act effectively. And we want you to gain that strategic advantage and power to make stuff happen. It's what you're going to need in the music business. Let's be honest. Mm-hmm. People are not looking for potential. They're looking for a reputation. They're looking for what you've already done as a songwriter. They're looking for what you've already written. They're looking for what merch you've already sold, how many shows you've already done, how many streams you have. That they want proof, social proof that other people like what you're doing and that you have value to your art. And then that's when you're going to get the management company. That's when you're going to get the pub deal. That's when you're going to get the record label, the booking agency. They got to know that it's going to work. And I mean, the good news is you don't have to ask anybody's permission anymore. You just need leverage. That's why we called it the C.L.I.M.B, C.L.I.M.B, creating leverage in the music business. And Mr. Brent Baxter, my good friend and co-host, came up with that, what we call a backronym. Mm-hmm. Brent is an award-winning hit songwriter with cuts by Alan Jackson, Randy Travis, Lady Antebellum, Joe Nichols, and more. And Brent helps songwriters like you turn pro by revealing how to write like a pro, do business like a pro. And not only that, on the regular basis, he actually connects you to the pros and gives you a shot at the bat there to make a relationship. You can find Brent at songwritingpro.com. Once again, that's songwritingpro.com.
And I would like to introduce you to my co-host, Johnny Dwinell. Johnny owns Daredevil Production. Daredevil has created over 25 national TV opportunities for their indie artists. They've done this by making them discoverable, and they've also created multiple tour opportunities. And through the power of digital marketing data, they've attracted a number of investors for their artists. Investors are the money people, y'all. And investors like numbers because they know numbers don't lie because numbers can't talk. You can find Johnny at daredevilproduction.com. That's production, singular, no S, and there is no S because there is no other Johnny D. Hello.
What's happening, brother? How are you?
Man, I'm good. Just ready to...
You good?
Just chilling.
It's cool, man. It's cool. Today, we're going to learn about how to be a great artist 101 from the most unlikely source that you probably think I'm going to draw from.
Pee Wee Herman.
Well, I think a lot of people think of this artist like Pee Wee Herman sometimes because of some of his antics back in the day.
Okay. Now I'm scared.
Yeah, we're gonna dive into an interview that just kind of blew my mind. My brother-in-law actually shot me the link. He's like, "Dude, you gotta listen to this." It was crazy. Mm. It was a long interview. It was 3 hours long.
Oh wow!
I was fascinated with it from the beginning, and it's a Joe Rogan interview, interviewing this artist. And if you haven't seen any of Joe Rogan's stuff, it gets pretty cool, pretty deep, and he gets in there and has some real conversations, which is fun. And if you don't know who Joe Rogan is, it's germane to the story here. I mean, Joe Rogan was a MMA fighter. He became the voice of MMA and helped really grow that industry to be as big as it is. And he's also a comedian, which is weird. Mm. Right? So he'll go, "That's my Great Dane drinking water on the side there," just in case you didn't know. But before we get to
doing this episode from the pool.
That's right, from the side of the pool.
Yes.
But before we get to that, let's take care of a little business here. The C.L.I.M.B podcast is proud to partner with Disc Makers. They've been supporting indie musicians before indie music was even a thing. When you're ready to make CDs, DVDs, and some vinyl, or distribute your music and videos with customized USBs, which is a cool kind of new way to market stuff, go to discmakers.com, DISCmakers.com. It's the only place you need to go.
And while you're there, you can click on the Guides and Resources tab and download some of their excellent free guides. They've just revised and expanded their home studio handbook, which has a ton of great advice and information for newbies and for studio veterans. You can find them online at www.discmakers.com or give them a call at 800-468-9353. That's 800-468-9353.
There we go. If you haven't joined the C.L.I.M.B community, please do so. That's on Facebook. It's a killer community. If you've got songwriting questions, if you've got marketing questions, music promo, there's a bunch of people on there that are actively sort of preaching the gospel that we're preaching, and they're part of the community, and they're helping other people out. So I think lots of people get good answers there, some good feedback. I love it when new people come in. There's just a whole plethora of people that come to welcome them. I mean, it's a warm, cool hang, man.
It is. It's a good spot to be.
That's right. So subscribe to the podcast as well, wherever you consume your podcast. Subscribe there. Make sure you get every single episode, every single mini-sode in order, and you can jump around and get them consume them as you like. But it's all put together for you. Leave a 5-star rating and review. Take 30 seconds. That way, other people who are thinking about maybe dipping their toe in the water and listening to the C.L.I.M.B you're gonna help influence that decision there. And then finally, the best compliment you could give Brent and I would be to absolutely share it. If you're getting something out of it, even if it's just one episode that kind of touched you in some way, that connected a couple dots, you had the epiphany, the aha moment, then by all means, please shout it out to the world. Tell your friends, put it up on social media, let everybody know where to find it and why you thought that way. And that helps us out a lot, right?
That's right. And speaking of 5-star reviews and sharing it, we have a new 5-star review we're going to read. The title is Yes, That's My Problem. It's a 5-star review by Tristan Lee Music. Been seeing Tristan around either Songwriting Pro community, Instagram, C.L.I.M.B community, somewhere I've been seeing Tristan around. So thanks for dropping in. And let's see, it says, just listen to my first podcast today. Here's your problem. Thanks to some awesome advice, I'm really working on discovering and developing my culture from here on out. So thank you, Tristan, for being part of the C.L.I.M.B culture and for leaving that tasty 5-star review. We're happy to be of service, and thanks for letting people know about it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's cool. Yeah, I Facebook stalked her a little bit. Like she had some comments or something going on. So like, what's going on with this girl here? And she's a good singer.
Cool.
She's got some cool stuff going on. Yeah, she's working. She's out there working.
All right. So what are we working on today? How to be a great artist 101.
And complete transparency, I have to give a disclaimer here. I am a huge fan of this artist. Okay. So I'm prepared to love this interview, and I love the crazy interviews as much as I love this one. But before I say the name, this interview was long. It was a 3-hour interview. You can do it in parts. I recommend you watch it. I wholly recommend you watch it. But it was so deep and so all about being an artist, focus, growing as a human being, being a better soul. It was really multi-layered in that level. The artist was David Lee Roth from Van Halen, man. Like, and it was recent, right?
Yeah.
And he's talking to Joe Rogan. If you look at the Joe Rogan interviews, most of them, if you get the full interview, it's a couple hours. They went 3 hours.
Wow.
Because I think even Joe wasn't sure what to expect maybe at the beginning, and was kind of blown away because David Lee Roth was the lead singer of Van Halen. He was wild and crazy, but super, super intelligent. And you definitely had some toxicity issues, right?
Yeah.
He took a lot of drugs, but even when he was doing that, it never stopped him from being this other person that was in the most physically and mentally focused person that you probably might ever meet in your whole life.
Interesting.
I mean, David, just to give you some background, like they would get off a huge world tour where he's the star, the man, the whole thing, and then he would just disappear into the jungle with this group of dudes he called the Jungle Studs. Or they would climb Mount Everest, which he's done. And he talks about in his biography, frustration when you're trying to tie your shoes at 20,000 feet with no oxygen.
40,000 feet, I think you said.
No, 20,000.
20,000 feet? Okay.
Yeah. I don't think...
40? I don't know how far 40 is. That's what you said off the air. I just trust in you.
Did I say 40,000? I meant 20,000.
Yeah, I didn't Google it.
No, 20,000 is that's the oxygen's really low at that point, and you're moving slow trying to figure this out. And I don't why would you do it without oxygen? Because I think it's harder without oxygen than it is with oxygen. So that's why he did it, And he would go down into South America and the Amazon and stuff and literally disappear. Like there was times where they had a big show opportunity come up and they had to send some poor sap from Los Angeles down into the jungle to find him,
like Romancing the Stone trying to find David Lee Roth.
Exactly. Like he wasn't with it. But some of the stuff I wanted to cover because he really, really had, there was so many mind-blowing moments in this interview, y'all, and I wanted to share it with you because it's the first thing I thought. I was like, oh, now I got to go back and listen to this whole damn thing again and take notes because I didn't catch it all. I was so busy just getting my mind blown. But as I mentioned before, like his mental focus, he's always challenging himself. I think David always had and I've spoken to some people who know him really, really well. And he's just always been the kind of guy who's a fan of doing something that scares the Jesus out of him, you know?
Yeah.
He loves to be scared. He was a runner. He ran a lot. He ran marathons. He is a rock climber. If you go look at some of not so much on the Van Halen videos, but on the David Lee Roth, on his personal records, especially the first two, there's a couple videos where he is literally like 007 style on the side of like a mountain, like a straight drop, sheer face thing, climbing like with nothing else, right? Like he's a martial arts expert in Kenjutsu, I think is the way you pronounce it, which is he calls it the master of the 6-foot staff and the swords. You see some of that in the Jump video where he's working with those swords. And we're going to talk about those swords a little bit too, because he really gets into the dynamics of excellence and how it requires a team, Brent. And he attributes it to these swords, and that's going to kind of blow your mind. A lot of people don't know this. But he also, like I said, was a mountain climber. He climbed Mount Everest. I believe he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. He studied calligraphy for 12 months, I believe, in Japan. He spent a lot of time in Japan. He wanted to learn how to write Japanese and speak Japanese, and just immersed himself in the Asian cultures, and was able to just talked about that, like the teacher that he had for 10 months who just would say nothing. He was the only guy in the room, and the dude would walk over and just look down at what he wrote and pause for a second and say, no, and then walk away. Like, 10 minutes later, or 10 months later, he comes over and the word he got was better. He's like, wait, what? But I mean, he talks about all these different things that he did. One of the other ones, a lot of people don't know this, in New York, I think he's 66 now. And at the age of like 52 or 54, he became an EMT. Why? And Joe asked him, like, why did you do all this other stuff? Like, what's all that about? And he was like, well, he goes, it was about, I just knew it would change me. I didn't know how it was going to change me, but I knew it would change me. And so he did it, and he did it with 150% moving forward. I'm thinking about your episode last week and how we talked about passion versus profit in songwriting. And I think if people had the attitude of, you know what, I'm just going to go forth into this because it's going to change me. Yeah. And I don't know how, but I'm going to learn something new, and it's up to me whether I feel like it's worth using or not, but at least you're going to learn something. But I mean, he was there with EMT, and Joe Rogan was kind of talking to him about, and here's a lesson in humility. This is David Lee Roth. He's like a mega freaking rock star. Yeah,
millions of records sold.
Oh, my gosh. Like the soundtrack to my youth, my probably number one guy for frontman, like just blew my mind. And Joe was like, was it weird, like going into the firehouse as the EMT into whatever part of New York you were in? Because he was in the ghetto and he was working night shifts a lot. So there's a lot going on there. Yeah. This wasn't Park Avenue. Right. He said, yeah, it was weird. First of all, I was the oldest guy there. So that was weird. And he's like, no, I mean, but, because you did it, Lee Roth. He's like, no, he goes, man, before I, because you have to go to school for like a year to learn how to do this, I think. And he said, I did that. And he said, before I did that, I wasn't somebody. And I came out and then I was somebody. And then in David Lee Roth fashion, he's like, somebody clean up the damn truck. And that was me.
Finally somebody.
Yeah, and he thanked the people. He's like, thank you for those who taught me and tolerated me for the 10 months. It changed my life, and I love it. And he just talks about all the things that he did, helping people, and the conversations you have to have with people, and the way that you need to communicate with people, right? And he was, as an artist, he gets into the communication part of it, and he's always looking for different ways to communicate with people. And that's really what the artist thing is about. It's what the songwriting thing is about. And again, just if you're new to the show, I always combine the two. To me, so like Brent, you're an artist. I mean, just because you don't sing on the record doesn't mean it's not mind-blowing what you can do. Mm-hmm. So I consider them one and the same. But and it's about communicating. It's about talking, giving somebody else the feels and getting them to understand where you're coming from, whether it's to make them laugh or to cry or to make them turn their head sideways, like, this is interesting. What is this, with the music or the lyric or whatever, to make them think. Mm-hmm. And he really kind of gets into this. And what he calls all these different areas where he puts his time and energy into, he calls it cross-training, which I thought was really interesting. Mm-hmm. Like almost like cross-training for your soul.
Yeah. So cross-training being training in different disciplines and different pursuits or different positions.
Yeah.
A company or something like that. So you're not just in one lane, you're training to do some different events, I guess. If you're in track or something, you don't just do the 400-meter dash. You're also practicing the hurdles and the
right. And you're working out in the gym, right? And then you're eating right, and you're doing all these different things that maybe don't necessarily equate to what you think the results should be, but it does.
So it's not just, I worked on my vocals and I worked on my writing.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he's doing physical stuff. He's doing mental stuff. He always was. Mm-hmm. He says to this day, he still takes acoustic guitar lessons, right? He's the rock star. Does he have to? No. Why? Because he's got the passion, because he loves it. He's interested in being better at it. Mm-hmm. It was fascinating to me how much they worked. And this is another reason why this really touched my soul, was just because I see a lot of him in me, in the sense of what we had to go through what I had to go through as an artist. But he's like, we worked 5-6 nights a week, 4 or 5 45-minute sets. And wherever we could drive and get a gig within 2 hours, they all came from Southern California, from Pasadena. He said, then we would do it. And he said, we learned there's a lot of different communities, societies in Southern California. And what I loved about it was they played to each of those rooms. Mm-hmm. So he's like, we go into a Spanish-speaking community, and man, they're like, "Orale, I want to hear Santana, man." So he's like, "Okay." So they go into, "You gotta change your evil ways, baby." Mm-hmm. They would go into, he goes, if you go out to Venice Beach, the surfers, they don't want to hear Santana, they want to hear Aerosmith. Mm-hmm. If you go to someplace like real ritzy, he said, you have to tone it down and do acoustic. Mm-hmm. And they would do these different things, but then he was talking about how it helped them grow. It gave them the background, the cross-training that they needed to be as good as they were. They talked about, to eat, we had to work, he said, so boxing for money, different than boxing for fun, right? Like, like you got to go work. And I thought of myself, like how many times I've gone on stage with a 102-degree fever. Yeah. Because I loved it, but if we didn't do it, we weren't going to get paid. And if we didn't get paid, we weren't going to eat. So this is what we're doing for the love of the craft, right? Mm-hmm. For the want to do it. You've heard the term, Brent, 10,000 hours.
Oh yeah, it's a Malcolm Gladwell thing, right?
That's right. It came from Malcolm Gladwell. Well, he said, that's a real nice way to put it. But he goes, when you're in Japan, he goes, in the Asian cultures, the way they put it is you've got to do whatever the craft is 10 hours a day, every single day for 10 years. He goes, that's about 30,000 hours. Mm-hmm. And he talked about one of the guys that worked with him as an EMT, who was the Flight for Life helicopter guy. So that guy mentioned him by name. He goes, that's a 40,000 hour man right there. And that's the guy that you want flying the helicopter, right?
Heck yeah.
And so he goes, this is the way you've got to think about your art, right? This is how you have to be an artist. He goes, I always love getting ready almost more than the show. Mm-hmm. Right? Because he goes, at the show, he goes, man, the spotlight's on the wrong person. The monitor blows. The guitar player's pissed, but there was fun at the photo shoot. There was fun at the band rehearsal, getting ready. It's the getting ready that you need to focus on and quit worrying about the end result. We always just kind of knew if we were as good as we thought we were, then they come to us. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. And he talked about how they had to win, the competition part of it, which I think is lost in today's society a lot. Everybody's afraid of competition because it feels bad, right?
Yeah.
everybody should get a medal or something like that for participating. But he's like, man, because back in the day, he talked about big bands. He goes, big bands have a real square sort of vibe to them because it ended up being elevator music.
Yeah.
Because you know how cutthroat that was back then? Like, every other week, the bands would have to play off because there's some new cats coming in, man. They wanted to get in on that big band. And so they would say, here you go. You're going to play this piece of music next week. Go practice. Come back. Winner gets the chair. And that's what you did. And it was brutal. You had to do it to eat, but that's what made you good,
Yeah.
And so he's like, we always had to win, whether it was Battle of the Bands, we had to win over the club owner. We had to win over the audience. Brent, I had a really killer consultation last week from this artist that I love. I actually love this artist. I think this guy's killer. Like, he does it different. It's interesting to me. And he was confiding and telling me some seriously private stuff just about him as an artist. He's just being vulnerable, and and he's like, man, sometimes I'll be up there, and he talked a little bit about getting pissed off when the audience isn't going the way he wants it to go.
Yeah.
And I checked him into the glass. I was like, that's on you, man.
You're right. What are you going to do about it?
And he knew. He's like, yeah, I know it's me. And I'm like, yeah, but no buts. Like, no buts. Like, you want to be a good artist, your job is to communicate with them. And if they're not listening to you, then you're not communicating.
Yeah.
Communication is not the intention. Because when everybody gets up on stage, they intend to communicate. But communication, the definition of that is what's being received.
Yeah.
And if they're not getting it, then you're not throwing the ball right.
Yeah.
Same way it works in the NFL, right? Aaron Rodgers drops back. Receiver runs a perfect route. Aaron throws the perfect pass, hits the receiver right on the chest, and he doesn't catch it and it falls on the ground. Then that's an incomplete pass.
Yeah.
Next down goes against the record in the quarterback rating. Like, it's on him.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that guy gets it. That's why you got to play for the room, right? That's that communication that they had to learn between a Spanish speaking community, say in the Valley, and playing Santana, and then going out to a working man party in San Bernardino where they want to hear ZZ Top, and then go to the beach where those guys want to hear Aerosmith. Like, they knew how to play for the room. They knew these people need to be communicated differently than these people, and we're here to communicate, right?
Yeah.
This one was huge. At one point, Joe Rogan asked him, man, are you guys ever aware of the impact that you had on culture? Because Joe graduated, he's a year older than me. He's like, I graduated in 1985, man. And he's like, dude, your Van Halen logo was on everybody, including my notebook. Like,
yeah,
going through high school.
Yeah.
He goes, and he just starts to go off, and David's like, yeah, I get it, man. Like, I was like the soundtrack of your youth. He's like, yeah. He goes, but do you get that? He's like, he said, the impact on society, he said, that's the result. The verb, that's contribution. I'm going to say that again. The impact was the result of what they did. But the verb, what they did, was contribute. Right. So it's
like, focus on the process.
Yeah. Focus on what you're going to contribute and how you're going to contribute it. So we talked about cross training, right? We talked about how they had to play for different rooms. He's like, it shows in our music, bro. He's like, listen to Jamie's Crying, right? The beginning of Jamie's Crying, the drum lick at the very beginning. He goes, that's Ricky Ricardo, man. Everybody asks me what my favorite Cuban is. They think I'm going to answer with something about a cigar. I say it's Ricky Ricardo. Because that's the rumba. Like, listen to it. That's not rock and roll, but we made it rock and roll. There's a little bit of me everywhere, Yeah. The middle break and Dance the Night Away. That's the cha-cha. They were getting into artists and just kind of talking about different kinds of artists. And they hit something that I thought was really profound. And they're saying, you kind of need to know that there's different kinds of artists and what kind of artist that you are. Well, he started off talking about Rod Stewart. He's like, Rod Stewart is probably the gold standard, right? Like, that voice, that personality, that everything all together. He was an amazing artist. And you can sing a Rod Stewart song, but there's something missing. It's not Rod Stewart. And I think the conversation was born from Joe Rogan bringing up Sammy Hagar. and what changed there. And he said, well, because Joe said it was good. He goes, it was good. And David's like, you bet it was good. It was really good, but it was just different. And he said, yeah. And I always joke about it being using the David Spade joke. It wasn't Van Halen, it was Van Hagar, right?
Yeah.
But he said, but then David points out, he's like, man, have you ever noticed, like, Dave, all Sammy's songs are about love. Love comes walking in, is this love? Like, he goes, but then what am I writing about? Ain't talking about love. Who am I running with? I'm running with the devil. Like, I'm going another way. Then Joe asked him if he had heard the new singer for Journey. And Dave said, he said, yeah. And the dude's like a Filipino guy that got like this gig. He didn't speak a lick of English, but he sounds just like Steve Perry.
Wow.
And I don't know if you've heard him at all, dude, but it's like
no, I haven't heard the new version.
Eerie, but and he said, Steve Perry's like a really good singer, but he's like this eloquent sound that comes with this thing. It wasn't much of a personality kind of a thing, right? That wasn't his gig. You got to understand the difference between the two. He talked about it in terms of actors. He's like, there's personalities, and then there's really, really good actors, right? And they're both very good at what they do, but you have to know the difference. Mm-hmm. He's, he didn't mention this in the interview, but I thought of Burt Reynolds. I mean, what acting gigs? Burt later in his life, Burt Reynolds did some better acting, but yeah. I was perfectly happy to pay to see Burt do Burt in any movie that he was in. Like, yeah, it was just another version of himself. Yeah. Same thing with like Jerry Reed, he was always just kind of Jerry Reed.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like you want that flavor. John Wayne is kind of John Wayne in most of his roles. Elvis in those movies was Elvis in those movies.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. He started out talking about, he's like, the difference is like, imagine you're sitting in a bar and the Lone Ranger comes and sits down next to you. Yeah, exactly. He starts telling you a story, it was, 100 years ago, it was a very dark and stormy night. And he's like, he can talk about it all he wants, but you're never going to get around the fact that, man, I'm sitting here talking to the Lone Ranger. Like, this is
right.
He goes, but then if you have like a real actor come and sit down next to you and tell you that story, 8 minutes in, you're bawling, like you're on the edge of your seat because they're really delivering the story. It's different, but they're both impactful, right? Yeah. And he joked about it when he was saying, talking about like Denzel Washington becomes an astronaut, and he's like, that's like the coolest astronaut you ever met. You're totally into the story. He goes, but if David Lee Roth puts on a freaking spacesuit, everybody's like, hey, what's Dave doing in a spacesuit?
All right.
Like they're not going to buy it, right? Because he's the personality.
I've heard a thing. It's funny. I've heard dueling quotes from, I think, Mick Jagger and Conway Twitty. Mm-hmm. Conway Twitty said, "It's not about the singer; it's about the song." Right. And I think Mick Jagger is quoted as saying, "It's not about the song; it's about the singer."
Well, it's so funny you brought that up because they got into that because in terms of they were attributing it in terms of comedy, right? Mm-hmm. He was saying, is it about the joke or is it about the comedian? David said, and Joe Rogan's like, oh no, it depends, man.
Because Joe's a comedian, so he's
he's getting into his art there, exactly. Yeah. And he's like, some comedians absolutely need good jokes. And he goes, look at Mitch Hedberg. He goes, none of that doesn't work unless you're Mitch.
I don't even know who that is.
Oh, dude, he's the greatest guy that like never happened. I think he succumbed to a heroin addiction and died way too early. But people were freaking out on him because he's so like, just go to YouTube and see some of that stuff. And it's like, it's crazy. It's funny, but it only works with him. Like he's the joke. Like he's in on it. Mm-hmm. I think Chris Farley was that way a lot. Chris Farley was just so funny. Yeah, right. Like whatever he did was
and so much his physicality that was just
And Mitch wasn't physical at all. Mitch was as stoic as you could possibly get. Mm-hmm. But just the joke, like I can't even remember how. Like it's so.
And it wouldn't matter if you told me. It wouldn't matter. Yeah,
it would be like, this guy's not funny. But when he says it, it's hysterical. Yeah. And so same thing, like David Lee Roth can get away with doing certain things that Jennifer Lopez isn't, right? Like she can't be that person. You got to know your lane. You got to know who you are as an artist and tackle that. He talked about being at the base camp at Mount Everest. And he said, I read this. There was a anonymous poem that was inscribed. It said, "Go climb Treasure Mountain. Do not return empty-handed. Where are you now?" And it was like, oh man, so good, right? Just do it. Just climb the mountain, and you're going to come back with something, right? It's just about the work. You have to do the work.
Yeah.
You have to do the work. It's about getting together with and doing the grind as an artist, as a writer, as a songwriter. You know, we talked a little bit about that last week with you on your episode. Mm-hmm. Joe asked him, like, when you wrote Running with the Devil, like, how'd you know when you were done? And and the answer that David gave was, it's not when you're done, it's how'd you get there. And he goes through this whole sort of David Lee Roth-ish explanation, but he's like, look, man, it took 18 minutes to write Running with the Devil. Joe Rogan's like, no way. He's like, yeah.
Oh, gosh.
But my whole life plus 18 minutes, which you and I have said before. Yeah. It's like all that work we did before. He said, you know, Van Halen took 5.5 years before he got a shot. Springsteen was in the club for 10 years before he got his shot. The Beatles in Hamburg were there for years, you know, and that's what made them amazing, was that regular grind. That's why we put the Lonely Highway Boys on Broadway. A lot of people didn't think that was a smart idea because, like, some people never leave Broadway like it's some kind of weird black hole. And it is, but only if the person chooses it to be.
Right, yeah.
To me, you know, I think they're in complete control of that. You know, he was talking about just being unforgiving about your art. He said, when you do that kind of grind, when you're doing it that hardcore 5 nights a week, he said, what you learn from playing the clubs and what do you learn from playing in the clubs and being in the grind? Like, you know, my string just broke, my nose is running, my girlfriend just ran off with 2 guys, not one, you know, I'm underpaid, I'm disrespected, I got bad feet, and my corns work, and I'm late, and, but you'll play.
Yeah.
You will play because you have to. It's the way that you're going to eat. And he said, just as you would expect that surgeon to perform at 4 a.m. And he's like, hey, this is my baby girl here, you know, and you want that person to have that surgeon to have that kind of dedication to his art at that moment. And why would you think that your art was any different? Well, why wouldn't you approach it the same way?
Yeah, going back to, I think I quoted earlier, Stephen Pressfield. Maybe I did. I know I did last episode, but I'm thinking The War of Art. He talks about you're already a professional in other areas of your life. When you go to your day job or you go to school, do you just not go that day if you're just not feeling it? If it's rainy outside, if you had a fight with your wife or your husband or whatever, no, you show up and you dig your ditch, you answer your phones, you do whatever it is you got to do, whatever your gig is, right? You go climb the high line, the electric pole and put people's power back on. Yeah. You're already professional. You're already trained to show up kind of no matter what's going on. So you just need to apply that to your art. Show up anyway.
Show up and do the work. And the needle moves because you get better at the art. And the only way to get better at the art is by doing more art.
Yeah.
By doing it. And by the way, on our description of art here, not only am I talking about making the art, but we're talking about how you promote the art, because that's also an art form. That's another form of communication. That's promotion is getting inside the mind of a consumer with your story and letting them know, like, this is worth it. You should check this out. And then you're going to earn the right for them you're going to earn the opportunity for them to listen to the music, and you better blow them away right there. It better be the good stuff. On some lyric idea, they talked about lyrics. And if you go back and listen to some of the lyrics that David Lee Roth has, I mean, this is clearly different than a country music lyric, but there's stories that are told, but he does it differently than all the Motley Crues and it's different, and it's his own thing in much in a different way, but it's kind of like separate, like the way Steven Tyler did it, right? Where it was like a sort of rap, tongue-in-cheek kind of a thing, a bunch of rhymes, but it was a little dirty and it was kind of cool and at the same time. But he talked about banking your ideas. He goes, I think about it like debate. You gotta, when you're going to debate somebody, you got to bank all these ideas so you have these different tangents that you can go on in the debate. When somebody brings up an alternative point of view, and you've got to debate them the other way, because you got to do the same thing with lyrics. So if you walk into a writing session and you haven't done any of your cross training, you haven't prepared, and you're going to try to create the lyrics right there. He's like 9 times out of 10, you're going to write the moon in June.
Yeah.
You know? At what time? I'm thinking noon. Put your hands in the air because you just don't care. Like he's like, he goes, but when you bank your ideas, and I call this differently. I just call it like honoring the muse. Mm-hmm. To me, like banking the ideas is the same lyrically speaking as what Keith Richards did in the Stones. If you heard the story about how he wrote Satisfaction, it came to him at 3:00 in the morning. Yeah. And he woke up and he had a little tape recorder right by his bed. And he wrote that, and then he went back to bed. And then he woke up the next day and remembered doing it. Yeah. And it was there. So to me, what he did was he learned to honor the muse because it comes when it comes, right? And if you don't honor it and write it down or record it, drop everything you're doing right then and there and put that somewhere so that you can come back to it later, then you're going to forget about it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was looking through my Evernote on my phone the other night. I was laying in bed and I was looking through, and Emily was on her Netflix, so I was wanted to be creative or whatever, and looking through my titles, of some of which, because kind of I capture them in the wild on my phone on Evernote. So it's just an app on my phone, have a file, song titles or ideas, and I'll just add new stuff to it. And there's one that I'd completely forgotten about, hadn't been put over to my main list yet. I'm like, oh, that's good. Yeah. I'm not sure when I came up with it. It was a while back. It's been several months. I was like, oh yeah, that would have been gone, but I got it. It's not going anywhere. I'm gonna write that sucker because it's good.
There you go. Right. And so sometimes when you honor the muse right then and there, it means one thing.
The bank is where the money is, Johnny.
That's right. But then you come back, like this used to happen to me. I come back and all of a sudden it's hit me like it's giving me a different kind of feels.
Oh, I've had that for sure.
But just as powerful, right? And just as strong.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I've had, I keep my hook book and my list that's been going for over 20 years now that, I just erase this title off there if I write it or if it's become just a massive hit for someone else. And I'm just like, I'm not going to write that. But usually it's only take them off if I write them. So it's over 4,000 titles long, right?
Wow. Yeah.
But sometimes, because artists change, trends change, there are titles that I wrote down. I was like, I'm not feeling it. I never wrote it until years later, maybe a new type of artist comes along. I've had that specifically with back when Colt Ford, he's doing his thing. And so more of the straight up country rap kind of thing. I'm like, oh, I got this title.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, if I think about it in terms of him, I can write that now. We demoed it and pitched to him and stuff. But it's like, oh, new artist comes along, trends change. And you think about for this kind of co-write or that kind of co-write and this type of artist who wasn't around 5 years ago when you got the idea, all of a sudden you're like, oh, man, this makes perfect sense for that. That's hot. Let's do that.
Yeah. See, I love that. And bank them, saying slogans, expressions you hear from somebody else, a storyline. Another songwriting friend of mine, Michael Garbin, he wrote Waiting for Tonight for Jennifer Lopez, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's over 30 million records.
Not bad.
That was the
poor guy needs a hug.
Yeah. One of the things that he does, one of the secrets he has, I'm going to share with you. You ready for this?
I'm leaning in.
Okay. So I tried this, not because I wanted to write a song, but just because I wanted to consume this content in a different way. He's like, I will sit down and watch sitcoms on TV, but I'm not watching the sitcom to watch the sitcom. I'm solely focused in on the script.
Yeah.
And what they're saying and how they say it. And then I can find something from there to be a little twist. So that just happened, right? Go with that. And then when I did that one time, I was like Seinfeld or something. I was like, oh, dude, it was gold.
It's gold, Jerry. Gold.
Yeah. It was ridiculous. Like how many, one episode, I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like this is insane. Different ways that you could go. Just talking about Joe Rogan being where he came from MMA. He was an MMA fighter, and then he kind of became the voice of MMA and is the guy that he's announcing the fights and everything. So he's like the Howard Cosell of MMA. But David says to Joe Rogan, he's like, man, you wouldn't step into a ring without a massive vocabulary of moves, right? Yeah. Like you can't go into a writing session without that same kind of preparation. You're a fool if you do.
Yeah.
You're going to get eaten up. one of the other things I want to touch on before we end this, I can't remember which number it is on the interview, but if you just go to YouTube and Joe Rogan and David Lee Roth, you'll pull it up, and it's a fascinating interview. And it's really, I mean, he's completely sincere and in the moment, and it's super, super fascinating. Like, this guy's had a crazy, fascinating life. But he talks about, I think they call him a katana. Forgive me if I'm
the sword.
That's the sword. Yeah. So he talks about specialization and the difference between being good and being great and being unforgettable and having that kind of presence. And he's like, these katanas, this is a thousands-year-old process of making these swords. And he goes, did you know that the guy who forges the sword is different from the guy who sharpens the sword? Who's different from the guy who makes the handle for the sword? Who's different than the guy who wraps the handle for the sword? Who's different from the guy who makes the little pin that makes it all come together? All different guys with different
disciplines
that are passed down from thousands of years of generations on how to do this way. And as such, these swords, when they're done, go right into museums. And they're incredibly sharp, right? Like the kind where you can throw up what's that floaty material, like with a scarf that just sort of wafts down over a sword, it just cuts in half. Like,
like the cartoons when they pluck a hair and they throw it up and it lands on the blade and splits the hair. Right?
Exactly. Like that sharp, you know?
Yeah.
To me, what that spoke to me was just about the need for specialization in a team in your music career. If you're trying to be an artist, you need to have a team. If you try to do everything yourself, something's going to suffer. I mean, one person every generation is Prince, who's so freaking good that they can do everything. He can play the drums, he can play the bass, he can play the bass better than his bass player, the drums better than his drummer, he can sing better, he does all the writing, he's the performer, he can do everything, and gets a deal at 17 years old and is legendary for kicking the Warner Brothers A&R guy out of the studio at 17 years old when the guy asked one question, he's like, get out. And he knew how to make records. I mean, that's Prince, and we're everybody else. Okay,
right, exactly. Two kinds of people in this world. There's Prince, and there's everybody else.
And there's everybody else. That's right. And we need the time. We need to put in the work, and you need a team. Like, you're not going to be. I've had more conversations in the last 3 months with artists who are really, really good artists, Brent, that are touring 200 plus days a year. They've built up their craft and they've built up their business enough, and now they're not getting to the next level. And why? Because they're spending too much time on all these other things, on marketing, on promo, on
working in their business.
You're working
on their
business.
Yeah,
exactly. How many conversations have you and I had about that?
Too many. Right? Yeah.
I mean, you constantly remind me
about it. Yeah.
And I'm always reminding you, because I forget, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got to get back to the future and what we're going to be doing. But in the beginning, you need to just make sure that you're getting the right education. I think that's what I see. David has a thirst for knowledge. I think he has a thirst for excellence, and he doesn't get in it, doesn't do anything half-assed. Like he's 100%. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to try to be the best at it.
Yeah,
man, you see just the athleticism, the athletic endeavors he went out on, the mental endeavors he's gone out on, the artistic endeavors that are aside from the music that he went out on and what they did. It's no surprise that they came as far as they came. And if you apply this kind of a thing to this mindset to your career, things will change. Make sure that you have the time to do the social media. Like, if you're not doing the process right, if you're not spending 90% of your time and 90% of your budget promoting your music, then nobody's going to hear it. If you're just doing it for passion, then God bless. Having it be done should be enough. There should be no reason that you need anything else. But if you want to be heard, if you want to be validated, if you want to have an audience, then you're going to have to promote it. That's going to take way more time than it takes to make the art.
Yeah.
And then making a new piece of art isn't going to it's going to be in front of the same people that you had here. So you're going to have to do something different and then attack it with the kind of focus and the kind of energy that David Lee Roth did in everything in his life, including drugs. Like he had the same focus and energy on that too, but I don't know how the man ran marathons, back.
Yeah.
But anyway, guys, well, that's all I really wanted to say about that. It's really a fascinating interview. There's a lot of stuff I didn't cover. As I said, it was a 3-hour interview, and just the conversations they had were like really, really good. He's super smart dude. So I promise you, I don't care how smart you are, there's going to be moments in an interview you're like, what the hell is he talking about? And then you're like, oh. And then you're like, that was brilliant. Like he had you leaning in. Like he knows exactly what the hell he's doing, even as a storyteller, Like he's so good. But let us help you with that. Let us help you with some of the marketing. Let us help you with at least teaching you how to be more efficient, be more of a ninja, if you will, at your social media. If you've only got limited time and limited resources, you really need to make sure that the time that you spend is effective and you're not doing the same old thing to the same old people. So we are available for consultation. Email us at info@daredevilproduction.com. Production is singular again. There is no S. info@daredevilproduction.com. Put consultation into the subject line of the email. We'll get back to you and schedule something. And you're going to see a change. You're going to see results. You're going to see the needle move and get to move forward with that. So with that, guys, that brings us to the end of another C.L.I.M.B episode. Make sure you join the C.L.I.M.B community. We'll let you in, but you got to ask first. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so that you're getting all the episodes 1, 2, 3 as they pop in there. Please take 30 seconds, leave a rating and review, 5-star rating if you can, if you like us that much. And then finally, share it. Let other people know about it. Share it on social media. Tell a friend about it. Make sure they go see it. Pull it up on their phone and say, dude, listen to this. It's going to help you. That's why we do this. We're here for one reason. We exist because we want you to win. So keep on climbing.
And we'll see you at the top.